You have been carrying something today that you were never meant to carry this long. Not the workload, not the difficult conversation, not the list of things still unfinished. Those are just the surface. What you are actually carrying is the residue of your own reactions. The cortisol still moving through your blood from a meeting 2 hours ago. The low-grade electrical charge of a message you have not answered. The invisible weight of a day that never gave you a single moment to fully exhale. Most people assume this is just what modern life feels like. They push through it. They call it stress, accept it as normal, and wait for the weekend to feel like themselves again. But the Stoics knew something that most people never learn. Your nervous system is not just something that happens to you. It is something you can learn to operate. And in this video, you are going to learn 5 methods drawn directly from Stoic philosophy and confirmed by modern neuroscience. Methods that show you exactly how to reset your own internal state. Not at the end of the day, not in a meditation room, not with an app, but in the middle of your life, exactly as it is right now. Method 3, by the way, takes 4 seconds. It is the same technique that Marcus Aurelius used before walking into situations that would break most people. We will get there. But first, you need to understand something fundamental about why you feel the way you feel, and why most of the solutions you have tried have not worked. The ancient Stoics did not have the language of neuroscience. They did not know what an amygdala was, or what cortisol does to the bloodstream. But they mapped the territory of the human stress response with a precision that is almost disturbing to read 2,000 years later. Epictetus wrote that people are not disturbed by things, but by the judgments they make about things. That single sentence contains the entire framework of modern cognitive behavioral therapy. He was a freed slave writing in the 1st century, and he got there first. Here is what he understood. Every moment you experience, your brain is doing 2 things simultaneously. It is perceiving what is happening, and it is interpreting what it means. The perception is fast and automatic. The interpretation is where you have power, but only if you develop it. When you do not develop that power, the interpretation happens automatically too. And it almost always interprets in the direction of threat. This is not a character flaw. This is geology. The part of your brain designed to protect you, the part that fires before you even consciously register a situation, does not distinguish between a deadline and a predator. It responds to stress as danger, and it keeps your entire system mobilized until you give it a clear signal that the situation has resolved. The problem is that in modern life, situations never fully resolve. There is always another message, another demand, another layer of unfinished business. So, the system stays on. The signal never comes. And over time, that low-grade state of activation becomes your baseline, so familiar that you stop noticing it until something makes it impossible to ignore. What you need is not to eliminate stress. That is not possible, and it is not even desirable. What you need is a reliable system for moving through stress without being consumed by it. A system for returning to your center again and again, as many times as the day requires. That is exactly what these 5 methods are for. The first method works because it bypasses your mind entirely and speaks directly to your body. Your nervous system has 2 primary operating modes. The first is activation, your sympathetic nervous system, the one that mobilizes you for action, sharpens your focus, floods your muscles with blood, and keeps you alert to danger. The second is recovery, your parasympathetic nervous system, the one that allows your heart rate to settle, your digestion to function, your cells to repair, and your thinking to become clear again. Running between these two systems is a nerve you probably have not thought about since your last biology class. It is called the vagus nerve, and it runs from your brainstem down through your chest and into your abdomen, touching almost every major organ along the way. It is the physical pathway through which your brain communicates safety or danger to the rest of your body. Marcus Aurelius wrote about keeping an untroubled spirit. He was not describing a passive state of hoping things go well. He was describing the active practice of returning to calm, deliberately, through discipline. The vagus nerve is the physical mechanism through which that practice works. Here is the technique. Breathe in through your nose for a count of 4. Let your belly expand, not your chest. Then breathe out slowly through your nose or slightly parted lips for a count of 7 to 8. Make the exhale significantly longer than the inhale. Do this 3 times in a row. That asymmetry, the long exhale, is not incidental. A prolonged exhale directly stimulates the vagus nerve. It tells your parasympathetic system to take over. Your heart rate drops. Your blood pressure stabilizes. The chemical signals of threat begin to dissolve. You can do this right now, while watching this video, without anyone around you knowing it is happening. You can do it before a difficult conversation. You can do it in a parking lot before walking into a situation you are dreading. You can do it in the middle of a moment that is pulling you toward reaction. The Stoics would call this maintaining your inner citadel. The citadel is not a wall you build to keep the world out. It is a center of calm that you return to, no matter what the world is doing. And this breath is the door. The second method is about getting ahead of your own reactions before they happen. Here is something that most people never realize about stress. The most damaging moments are not the big crises. The big crises are obvious. You know they are happening. You can brace for them. Instead, the most damaging moments are the small ones. You did not see coming. The comment that landed wrong. The email with an unexpected tone. The minor inconvenience that somehow undoes an entire hour of composure. These catch you off guard precisely because you were not prepared for them. Epictetus described the practice of Prosoche, a word that translates roughly as watchful attention, or the discipline of noticing what is arriving before you decide how to respond to it. He trained his students to stand, as he put it, like a guard at the gates of their own minds, not to block impressions from entering, but to greet them consciously instead of letting them rush through unchecked. Here is how this becomes a practical daily system. Every morning, before the day begins, identify the 1 or 2 situations that are most likely to trigger an automatic reaction in you. This does not require deep psychological excavation. It is usually obvious. You know what the difficult meeting is. You know who the difficult person is. You know which task you have been avoiding. Once you have identified it, spend 60 seconds, just 60 seconds, mentally stepping into that situation before it happens. Ask yourself, when this moment arrives, what impression is about to come through that door? And do I consent to the interpretation my mind will automatically attach to it? That word, consent, is the key. Epictetus was emphatic that between every event and your response, there is a space. Most people never find that space because they never look for it. The Watchman Protocol is the practice of finding it every single day, deliberately, so that when the moment arrives, you already know where you are standing. When you practice this consistently, something unexpected happens. The situations that used to hijack you lose their automatic power, not because they become less difficult, but because you have already met them once in your mind, with intention. Your brain stops treating them as complete surprises. The amygdala has less fuel to work with. The gap between stimulus and response gets wider. That gap is where your freedom lives. The third method is the one Marcus Aurelius used. It is the fastest nervous system reset in the Stoic toolkit. Before getting to the technique, you need to understand why voluntary discomfort was central to Stoic practice. This is one of the most misunderstood aspects of the philosophy. People assume the Stoics endured hardship because they thought suffering was good. That is not it. They practiced voluntary discomfort because they understood something that takes most people decades to figure out. If your nervous system has never learned to handle shock and return to calm quickly, it will treat every minor disruption as a catastrophe. But if you regularly and intentionally expose yourself to uncomfortable experiences and practice returning to center afterward, you build what the Stoics called apatheia. Not the absence of feeling, the freedom from being controlled by feeling. Cato the Younger, one of the most celebrated Stoic practitioners, was legendary for walking barefoot in cold weather, for eating the plainest possible food, for choosing discomfort whenever comfort was available. He was not punishing himself. He was training his nervous system the same way you train a muscle, under controlled load, so it becomes stronger under uncontrolled circumstances. The 4-second reset borrows directly from this principle. It works through a biological mechanism called the mammalian dive reflex. When cool water makes contact with your face, particularly the area around your eyes and nose, your brain receives an immediate signal. Ancient survival programming activates. Your heart rate drops. Your vagus nerve takes full control. A wave of stillness moves through your system in under 5 seconds. This is not metaphor. This is physiology. The effect is measurable and immediate. Here are 3 ways to apply it without needing a cold shower. First, run cold water over your wrists and the inside of your forearms for 20 seconds. The blood vessels close to the surface there respond quickly to temperature change, and the effect moves through your system fast. Second, splash cold water on your face, specifically around your eyes. 3 to 5 splashes. Then stand still for 4 seconds without doing anything else. Third, if you have access to ice, press it against the back of your neck or hold it in your palm for 10 seconds. Do any of these immediately after a moment of high stress, before a situation that requires your full presence, or when you feel the heat of frustration rising and you want to stop it before it becomes something you regret. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations that he woke every morning and reminded himself what kind of people he would encounter that day. Difficult ones, ungrateful ones, irrational ones. Then he went to face them anyway, without armor and without anxiety. The cold gate is how you build that readiness. 4 seconds, a clear head, a system that knows how to come back. The fourth method addresses the primary reason most people feel overwhelmed, even when nothing catastrophic is actually happening. Your brain has a processing limit, not a small one. It is remarkably capable. But it has one critical design flaw, which is that without deliberate intervention, it treats every unresolved thought as an open task that needs to stay active in working memory. Psychologists call this the Zeigarnik effect, the tendency of the mind to hold on to incomplete things and return to them repeatedly until they reach resolution. It is why you think about the conversation you did not finish. It is why the email you have not sent sits in the back of your mind during dinner. It is why you lie in bed at 3 in the morning, running through a list of things you cannot actually do anything about until morning. Your nervous system stays activated not because there is genuine danger, but because there are too many open loops, and your brain is trying to close all of them simultaneously. Epictetus gave this the most elegant solution in the entire Stoic canon. He called it the Dichotomy of Control. His framework was simple and radical. Everything in your life falls into one of two categories: things that are up to you, your judgments, your intentions, your responses, your character, and things that are not up to you, everything else. This is where the folder system comes in. It is a practical daily implementation of this principle. When you feel overwhelmed, stop. Give yourself 30 seconds. Take every thought, worry, task, or concern that is currently active in your mind and assign it to one of two folders. Folder A contains everything that is genuinely within your control. Right now, not tomorrow, not in theory, right now. Your next action, your attitude toward a specific situation, how you choose to speak to someone in the next 10 minutes. Folder B contains everything else: other people's reactions, outcomes you cannot guarantee, past events, future uncertainties, the economy, the traffic, the things someone said about you to someone else that you heard about secondhand. The exercise is this: anything in folder B gets closed. Not suppressed, not denied, closed. You acknowledge its existence. You note that it does not belong to you, and you mentally place it down. Not because it does not matter, but because continuing to hold it is consuming resources you need for folder A. Epictetus wrote that we suffer not from the events of our lives, but from our judgments about them. When you run the folder system, you are not changing what is happening. You are correcting the assignment of energy. You are stopping the practice of spending your finite cognitive and emotional resources on things that were never yours to solve. Most people, when they try this honestly for the first time, are shocked to discover how much of what is draining them lives in folder B. Not 80%, not 90%. Sometimes it is all of it. And once you see that, clearly and without flinching, the weight changes. It does not disappear, but it is no longer your weight to carry every minute of every day. The fifth method is the one that makes the other four sustainable. Here is a pattern you might recognize. You have a good day, or at least a manageable one. You handle things reasonably well, but by the time you sit down in the evening, you feel a vague, unspecific heaviness that you cannot quite name. The day is over, but it doesn't feel finished. And when you try to sleep, your mind keeps returning to fragments of it. The moment that went sideways, the thing you should have said, the task you started but did not complete. This is not insomnia. This is an incomplete cognitive cycle. Your brain is still processing the day because the day was never properly closed. Seneca, who wrote more practically about daily Stoic practice than almost any other philosopher, had a specific evening routine that he described in detail in his letters. Every night before sleep, he conducted what he called a review of the day, not a judgment of himself, but an honest accounting of his own behavior and its alignment with his values. He asked 3 questions. The first, where did I lose my composure today, and what triggered it? Not to punish himself for the reaction, but to identify the pattern so he could prepare better tomorrow. The second, what did I handle well, even when it was difficult? This is not self-congratulation. It is calibration. It teaches your brain to recognize its own capacity, which makes it less anxious about future challenges. The third, what is one thing I carry forward into tomorrow? And what is one thing I leave here, permanently? That last question is the most important. It creates a formal boundary between today and tomorrow. It tells your nervous system, explicitly and deliberately, that the processing of this day is complete. The open loops get closed, not because every problem is solved, but because you have made a conscious decision about what is finished and what belongs to tomorrow. Neuroscience confirms what Seneca discovered by observation. When the brain receives a clear completion signal, it stops devoting background processing power to unresolved material. Cortisol levels drop. The transition into genuine rest becomes easier. You wake the next morning, not carrying yesterday's residue into the first hour of a new day. This practice takes 3 minutes. 3 minutes to formally end a day. 3 minutes to stop the invisible accumulation of emotional debt that, over weeks and months and years, becomes the exhaustion that no amount of sleep seems to fix. Seneca wrote to his friend Lucilius, "Let us go to our rest with joy and gladness. Let us say, I have lived. The course which fortune set for me, I have run." He was not being poetic. He was describing a daily practice of closure that allowed him to show up fully, day after day, in a world that gave him every reason not to. You can do the same. 3 questions, 3 minutes, every evening. That is the system. Here is what these 5 methods have in common. None of them require you to eliminate stress. None of them require a perfect environment, a quiet room, or a version of your life that is calmer than the one you actually have. All 5 are designed to work inside your real life, in the middle of it, not at the edges of it. The Citadel Breath gives you a reset you can deploy anywhere, anytime, without anyone knowing. The Watchman Protocol moves your point of power from reaction to preparation. The Cold Gate gives you a 4-second physiological override when the moment requires it. The folder system stops you from spending yourself on what was never yours to carry. And the Evening Audit closes each day so the next one can begin clean. The Stoics did not build these practices because their lives were calm. Marcus Aurelius governed an empire under plague and constant war. Epictetus was enslaved for years before he was freed. Seneca navigated imperial courts where the wrong word could mean execution. They built these practices precisely because their lives were not calm, and they refused to let the chaos of the world determine the state of their inner one. You are not required to be perfectly composed every moment. You are not required to never feel the weight of what you carry. But you are capable of building a system that keeps bringing you back to yourself, to your center, to the version of you that chooses how to respond rather than simply reacting to whatever arrives. The world will always be loud. The only question is whether you have something steady enough inside to hear yourself think. Build the system. Start today.